Hello, and thank you for joining the ARC of Fort Bend County Parent Education and Support Group meeting on Zoom today. I'm Carrie Axtell, the Youth and Education Advocacy Program Director here at the ARC of Fort Bend County. A little bit about us. We're a nonprofit organization for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or IDD, such as autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy. Our mission is to ensure opportunities for people with IDD and their families to maximize their quality life within our community. We do that through advocacy for and with people with IDD, through community outreach and providing information about community services and resources that are available to families. We provide presentations, resource fairs, and parent support groups, such as this one, and we hold a variety of excellent social and recreational programs, such as our Teen Tween Social, Parent Night Out, 20-something social group, adult social recreation club, and Special Olympics for adults, much, much more. So if you have any questions about the ARC of Fort Bend County and what we do, I encourage you to visit our website, arcoffortbend.org, and like our Facebook page, because we do update that regularly with not only what we're doing, but other community events and activities out there in the community and information you might find interesting. So you can always reach out to me as well, and I've put our contact information and my contact information in the chat box. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. You're in for a treat because there's some exceptional professionals here in the community who share their knowledge and expertise with us. The ARC of Fort Bend County Parent Education and Support Group meets one Thursday each month throughout the school year at 11 a.m. That 11 a.m. is the presentation portion, and at 12 p.m. we switch to our parent support group portion. This month, we're honored to welcome Marilyn Gilbreath with the Community Outreach and Awareness Specialist with Texas Workforce Solutions, and she's going to talk to us about vocational rehabilitation services. Before I formally introduce Marilyn, I'd just like to go over what to expect during today's meeting. When you logged on, your microphone was probably automatically on mute to help cut down on noise and to better hear our speaker. But if you'd like to ask a question during the presentation, please do. Feel free to unmute yourself, ask a question, or if you're more comfortable typing your question, you can use the chat box, and I'll be checking that and letting Marilyn know about these questions. We usually learn a lot through people's questions, so thank you for asking them. And I did receive already one email from a person earlier that had a question, so I'll be reading that question off to Marilyn as well at the end of her presentation. If it's might already be addressed during the presentation, but if not, it'll be a great recap. So as some of you know, this group has a dual purpose. The presentation's at 11 a.m. and then at noon, after I stop the recording, the parent support group portion begins. So parents who'd like to stick around and visit and bounce questions and ideas off of one another, please do. And as always, if you have questions and you want to discuss things just one-on-one with me, please send me an email. And again, my email is in that chat box. So without further ado, I'm pleased to welcome our speaker today, Marilyn Gilbreath. Marilyn has a Master of Science degree in Family Studies and Counseling and is employed with the Texas Workforce Commission Vocational Rehabilitation Services. She has 30 years of experience in various positions working with individuals with disabilities. Having worked with the visually impaired, blind, mentally or physically disabled individuals has provided her with a broad understanding of employee and employer needs in the work environment. Marilyn has worked as a disability examiner, blind children specialist, a vocational rehabilitation counselor, a transition vocational rehabilitation counselor, a regional transition specialist, and a training specialist, and is currently the communication outreach and awareness specialist in Region 5. So as you can see, she's very passionate about helping individuals reach their vocational goals and has a wealth of experience. Her belief in wraparound services has provided her the opportunity to work with other state agencies and nonprofits, ensuring individuals and families have all the necessary resources to become productive members of the world of work. And it is my pleasure to introduce Marilyn Gilbreath.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you so much, Carrie. Let me talk a little bit about my position. So a lot of you may have known us as TRC, Texas Rehabilitation Commission. Some of you may have known us as the Texas Commission for the Blind. Some of you knew us as that long drawn out name, Department of Assistive and Rehabilitative Services. Once we went under Texas Workforce Commission, Workforce Solutions, Vocational Rehabilitation Services, we got lost somehow. And so in another 6 days or so, my position was created a year ago to date. And there's one of me in each region. And it was created for the particular point that a lot of people have lost connection with vocational rehabilitation services. And so my job is to ensure that the community is aware that vocational rehabilitation services is alive and well. And so my job is to connect someone who has a mental, physical, or visual disability to an actual vocational rehabilitation counselor to get services. So we have several programs under VR, and that's what I'll refer to it, vocational rehabilitation. I'll refer to it as VR. But today I'm talking about employment. I'm talking about vocational rehabilitation services leading to employment. So if you'll follow along with this PowerPoint, stop me if you have questions. I don't have a problem with that. Or if you want to save your questions to the end, that's fine as well. But everything that I'm talking about today leads to work. Everything we talk about today leads to work. And when I talk about employment, there's a caveat to that. We talk about competitive integrated employment. We term it as CIE. You know, the state has all these wonderful acronyms, and that's one of them. Competitive integrated employment. What does that mean? That means we help somebody with a visual, mental, or physical disability get the same job you and I have. They just have the same qualifications despite having a disability. That's competitive integrated employment. A lot of people say, well, do you have jobs for people with disabilities? No, we don't. We have competitive integrated employment. So with that being said, that's what I'll be talking about today, is helping people walk through that VR process leading to employment. And so what is vocational rehabilitation? So our services help someone with a disability obtain a job, retain a job, or advance in employment. So sometimes we have people coming to us and saying that they're needing help getting employed because there's an impediment to employment. What do I mean by impediment to employment? There's something about their disability that's getting in the way of them getting a job, keeping that job, or advancing in that job. And that's what vocational rehabilitation is. It's helping people with disabilities get their foot in the door, keep that job, or advance in that job. So who do we serve? And I get that all the time. I'm not going to go through each one of these bullets, but I want you to understand anybody with any kind of disability. So people say, well, what about this? Or what about this? We could sit here for the next hour and just talk about disabilities. And I'd say, yes, yes, yes. Okay. So we serve people with a variety of disabilities. And these are just some of those, you know, people with mental and behavioral health conditions. So see, people say, well, do you help those with schizophrenia? Yes. Do you help those with bipolar? Yes. Okay. Do you help people with intellectual and developmental disabilities? Yes. Do you help people with a traumatic brain injury or a seizure disorder? Yes. Okay. So we help people with mental, physical, or visual disabilities. If there's a question about whether or not we serve that population, call me. Call me. That's all I can say. Don't determine that our services can't help you. Let us walk you through that. And so the first thing that people say is, well, am I eligible? You may be eligible for services depending on how your disability interferes with work. So you heard me earlier talk about impediment to employment. Let's just take a moment and let's stop and think about our work environment, our community environment, or even our home environment. How many people do you know that have a mental, physical, or visual disability and they work every day? Some of them make a whole lot more money than we do. They don't have an impediment to employment, which means that disability is not hindering them at all. In order to be eligible for VR services, you have to have an impediment. There has to be something that's getting in the way of you obtaining, advancing, or retaining that job. That's when we talk about, are you eligible? Okay. If there's not an impediment to employment, then VR services are not appropriate for you. Okay. And we have a process. So I like to talk about our flow chart. We're not an emergency kind of facility in that We have wraparound services. So if your lights are off, yes, we can help you get connected to a resource, but you're not going to be able to walk into our offices, well, pre-COVID, but you're not going to be able to get services started today and be working tomorrow so you can pay your light bill next week. Does that make sense? So there's a process. So we have what we call an initial contact. And that's what I want you to do with me. If you know somebody or you're somebody with a disability and you want to get connected to VR services, then you need to call me and I'll do what we call an initial contact. Okay, so once you get initial contact, then we put you through the system. I get you connected to a counselor, and then there's an application and diagnostic interview that they do. And that application and diagnostic interview is for that counselor to get to know you and your disability a little bit better and ask you some questions and figure out what's going on with you. Then we talk about the next phase, which is eligibility plan development. That's determined. Here are all the issues that are coming up with you getting employed. Here are some services that we can put in place to help with that, because whatever your impediment to employment is, we want to provide VR services to address those impediments to employment. Does that make sense? Okay. And then we have what we call an assessing and planning comprehensive assessment. We're sitting down and we're talking about how your disability affects you getting a job, how it affects you keeping that job. Have you been fired from many jobs because of disability? We want to walk through and talk through some of those issues so that you and the counselor can come to an agreement that here are the things that I struggle with. And then here's some VR services that can help me with those issues that I struggle through. And once we determine what that looks like, then we do what we call an independent plan for employment. And again, we got that wonderful acronym, IPE, an independent plan for employment. And I focus on the word independent because people say, well, my neighbor got this, this, and this, and my cousin in another city got this, this, and this. It's an independent plan for employment. Everybody won't need everything. Somebody with the same disability won't need all the same services because it's what is your particular impediment to employment that we're going to address, that we're going to provide VR services for to help you get employed. And then once you're employed, successfully employed, we monitor you for 90 days, 90 consecutive days to ensure that that job was a good fit, that all the services we provided to you up front are going to help you obtain that job and retain that job. So we're watching you for 90 days to determine that. And the counselor and the customer have a conversation throughout that 90-day period of time on how things are going. And at the end of those 90 days, everything is great. The customer's doing well on the job. The employer is happy with the customer. Then that counselor will close that case as successful because we have provided the vocational rehabilitation services they needed to address their impediments to employment. We have helped them get a job. They are working successfully for 90 days. We close that case successfully. So a lot of times people don't understand VR services. We're not lifelong. We're here to come in and sit down with you and address what those issues are and put some services in place to ensure that you can become employed. Then people talk about, well, what's the first requirement for eligibility? So as I said earlier, you have to have a physical or mental disability that results in a substantial barrier to preparing for, obtaining, engaging, retaining, or advancing in employment. That's the first requirement for eligibility, okay? Second requirement, the customer requires our services to prepare for, obtain, engage, or retain, or advance in employment. So VR services must be the answer to those concerns in order for us to determine the second requirement for eligibility. If somebody comes in and says, oh, you know what, the VR services that y'all are talking about, I don't want to do that, then that's where we stop because we can't go any further, okay? The third requirement for eligibility is that the customer can benefit from our services, okay? Because we're talking about, again, competitive integrated employment at the end of those vocational rehabilitation services. So once you've been determined eligible, we know that VR services can assist you. We know that you can benefit from those. That's our third and final requirement for eligibility. So here's the biggie that a lot of people ask or they get concerned about. Does eligibility for VR depend on my income? Absolutely, positively, no. Okay. Our governor could come in and apply for services. Oprah Winfrey could apply for services. Eligibility is not determined by your income. So I want you all to recognize that and be aware of that. So then we talk about what kind of services are available. This is a small list of services. This goes back to what disability do we serve? We could sit here for the rest of the afternoon and talk about the different services we have available. But I just want to give you an overview of some of the services that we provide. We do training. We do counseling on how your disability is affecting your ability to get a job or to retain a job or to advance in that job. Sometimes you need more intense counseling. You need psychiatric counseling. Then we have contractors out there that we work with that we can provide that for you as well. We take care of medical services, hearing aids, transportation. Remember that our service is not lifelong. So we may help you with transportation while you're preparing for employment. And then once you get employment, then that becomes your responsibility. We help with prosthetics. We help with sign language interpreters, with Braille instructions, orientation and mobility. People say, well, what is O&M? Orientation and mobility helps someone who has a visual impairment or blind navigate their world, how to get back and forth to work, how to navigate around your work site. Okay. We do on-the-job supports. Maybe we need to come into your job site and look at your work area and make an assessment of what supports or what assistive technology could help you better do your job. Or maybe it's simply helping you find a job. Okay, those are just a very few of our VR services that are available. And remember I talked about earlier about individualized services? Again, you may not need everything on that list, and you probably won't. I can guarantee you that you won't, because we want to look at what your impediment is. And those are the services that you'll receive to reach your employment goal. So my employment goal, I may have schizophrenia, and my employment goal may be to be a customer service rep with the state of Texas. Somebody else has schizophrenia and they want to be the county tax assessor. We have two different employment goals. There's going to be two different types of impediments to employment, but we have the same type of disability, right? So that's why we talk about an independent plan for employment, because although our disability is the same, our employment goals are different. And most drastically, you know that the county tax assessor has a different set of training than will be the customer service rep for a state of Texas agency. So that's why we talk about independent plan for employment. And everybody doesn't need the same thing, or everybody doesn't need everything. And so what is a plan? So if you're eligible for VR services, the next step will be to develop your plan for reaching your goal. So if I have schizophrenia, then I'm gonna have a plan written for me with my counselor that talks about how I'm going to be a customer service rep for a state agency. That's my employment goal. And then we'll talk about what services are needed to lead to that end. So the services that you need to reach your employment goal are the only services that VR can provide. Why is that? Because we have federal and tax money that we have to be a good steward over. So if the services we're providing you have nothing to do with your employment goal, we're not able to help in that area. That's why I talked about earlier on wrap services. VR services couldn't pay for your light bill or your car note, but we could connect you to a resource that could. Does that make sense? Our services have to be geared toward that employment goal. All right. So working towards your IPE, your counseling, you will monitor your progress and your participation in those services. So let's say your services may take you a year. Maybe your services take you 3 years. Whatever amount of time it takes you to get through all those VR services, the counselor and you will stay in touch as those services are being provided, completed successfully, and you move to the next stage. So you're working towards your IPE goal, your independent plan for employment. All right. So successful closure. That's a lovely thing for us and our customer, because that means you've taken all those VR services, you've gone through them, you've completed them successfully, you've gotten a job that you're happy with, that was your employment goal, you've been on that job for 90 days, everything is wonderful, Customers happy, employees happy, counselors happy, and then we call that a successful closure. So the counselor cannot just take your word that you're employed and happy. We have to go through a process of determining your employment. So that could be contacting your supervisor if you approve that. There's several different means that the counselor has in proving your employment. And so once that is done, then your case is closed successfully after that 90-day point. Okay. And the mechanisms that you'll use for determining successful employment, you will sit down and discuss that, because I know everybody doesn't want their employer to be contacted, but you and your counsel will have those discussions and you'll make that decision on what that looks like. What you find right here is our Texas Workforce Commission contact information. That's how to contact our agency. So you may want to take a picture of that. But more importantly, here's how to contact me. And you may want to take a picture of that as well. So my name again is Marilyn Gilbreath. I am out of the Timmons Lane location once we get back into our offices, but you can always reach me at this email address. The number you see on the screen is different than the one that Carrie gave you, because that's my office number. No worries. That office number rings straight over to my cell phone. But my cell phone number again is 281-732-1316. But I encourage people to reach out to me by email, because that telephone tag thing is a nightmare. But you can put a lot more into an email about the concerns or whatever the issues are and that kind of thing. And I can address those as well in the email. But I want you to feel very confident in knowing that Vocational Rehabilitation Services is alive and well. We're here even in the midst of COVID. So if there's a reason that you have to see a counselor, we have some established parameters to help you make a contact personally with a counselor. We're doing things through mechanisms such as this, through Zoom, through Teams, texting, audio, video. There's all kinds of means of helping you walk through that vocational rehabilitation process, even in the midst of COVID. And when I speak of COVID, I like to make sure that I add this piece too. If you or someone you know has lost your job because of COVID and has a physical, mental, or visual disability, please call us, because we can assist in getting you reemployed. If you've lost your job because of COVID, please call me so I can get you into our system and get you connected with a counselor to get you reemployed. A lot of people think, well, I've lost my job because of COVID and COVID this and COVID that. People are still hiring out there, guys. People are still hiring. And we have what we call business coordinators, BRC. They really help our customers find employers that are willing to hire. So our business relations coordinators are out there. They work in tandem with the counselor, and there are jobs right now. We work across the table with Workforce Solutions, work in Texas, helping our customers find employment. Okay. With that being said, I'm going to pull down my PowerPoint and look in the chat and see what I see. I see 8. So let me see what we have here. I'm going to read it and then
we do have a question about just kind of what you described, what the process is after 90 days and the person has successfully found their right job match. So what happens if 60, 90 days and it hasn't maybe been the right match? What happens?
Then the individualized plan for employment has to be revisited, because maybe that was not the right job for you. Or maybe we did not give you all the services. Or maybe there were some things happening with your disability that you didn't realize that formed an impediment. So then we go back and we do an amendment to that plan and we look at what services we need to address that particular situation. Very good question.
Okay.
Very good question.
You keep the same counselor then you've been working with, and you just continue
because
on?
your case has not been successfully closed because something happened within that 90 days. So you and that counselor need to sit down and talk about that's why I say you stay in touch. So if I'm having a problem on my job and I'm talking to my counselor, I should be saying, hey, this is the problem I'm having on the job. Don't wait until something horrific has happened. That's why you want to keep that contact. And the counselor will establish what that contact will look like. They'll determine how often we will talk, how you'll share what's going on with you, how you'll talk to your employee if it's a disability related issue. All those kind of things are happening during that time frame that you're actually on the job.
Okay. And another question here in the chat was, if a person loses their job and it's been more than the 90 days or a year later down the road, so maybe it was good for a while, maybe the case is closed, later on down the road, something happens, can they go back to vocational rehabilitation again?
Yes, you can come back to us again. Now, be mindful, if you lost your job because of your disability, absolutely. But if you lost your job because you flipped the table over and told the manager you're not working that schedule, and that didn't have anything to do with your disability, that's altogether different. But if you lose your job again and it's relative to your disability, then please contact us, because there could have been something we missed, or your disability could have progressed and become more severe than it was at the time we worked with you. So please, yes, call us again.
Okay. There was another question I received via email earlier on, and the question is, can a person who's qualified for either VR or the pre-ETS, ETS students, can they ask Texas Workforce Solutions service coordinator to purchase a service specifically to fit the student's needs, and how? And is there some type of form or something to fill out? What's the procedure?
Okay, so I'm not sure what that question is, but I'm gonna split it up.
Okay.
Remember, we work under, VR is one department under Workforce Solutions, Texas Workforce Commission. You see all that behind me? So Texas Workforce Commission, Workforce Solutions does some things with youth. When you come to the VR side of the house, yes, we have pre-employment transition services. You can work with a vocational rehabilitation counselor, or some schools have what we call a transition vocational rehabilitation counselor who's actually in the school, okay, who works for VR. And so they will work with the parent and the student to determine what pre-employment transition services are available to that student. And so that's a conversation between the parent, the student, and the counselor.
Okay. And is that usually, that's the maybe like 14 to
22 is our transition program.
Okay. So that process, because it can be kind of complicated, right? You've got this big umbrella of, Texas Workforce, but then there's these various things that are under it.
Right.
So under the big umbrella of Texas Workforce, one part of it is pre-employment transition services.
No.
Oh, okay.
VR is a part.
Under VR.
It's under VR. Okay. I apologize. My work cell is ringing off the hook.
Right.
VR,
okay.
Vocational Rehabilitation Services, starts at age 14 to deaf. That's our VR program. So we have deaf and hard of hearing. We have blind and visually impaired. We have transition program. We have a multitude of different programs. So it depends upon what program you're in. So if you're 14 to 22, you're going to be in the transition program under VR.
Okay.
Everybody's still working with a counselor. Okay. Some high schools have that transition counselor who comes into the schools, and they're connected that way. Some schools have an adult VR counselor who comes in periodically. Okay. Others call us and say, I have a child who's 16 who has a disability, and they're still connected to a VR counselor, whether it's transition or an adult counselor, and they'll walk through the VR process. Pre-ETS is just one of those VR services that I named, like orientation and mobility, sign language interpreter. That's just one of the services we provide.
Okay. So that's by age, obviously, right?
Right.
Pre-employment, because and I've just talking with some of the other higher ability navigators that you all have and that side of the house.
And that's under Workforce Solutions, yes.
They're under Workforce, yes. That's why I think it is. It's just a maze of different acronyms, and so so you really don't know where to begin.
I know.
If you have a person who maybe has that 14 to 22-year-old still in high school wanting to do those pre-employment type of activities, what would be the first step? Where would
they need to apply for VR services, and they can go through me.
Okay, so
they can contact me, and I can do an initial contact, and I still get them connected to a counselor. Doesn't matter what their age is. Now,
Okay.
what I may do is if a parent calls me and I say, what school does your child go to? And they tell me, and I know there's a transition counselor at that school, I'm going to connect them to that transition VR counselor.
Okay. All right. So let's say now we've got an individual who's after high school. Maybe they've done a little community college, or maybe they haven't. Maybe they're looking or exploring further education, or kind of curious about some different areas of jobs, and maybe they're in their mid to late 20s. They would also contact you to be connected with would that be under the umbrella of vocational rehabilitation?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So VR serves 14 to death.
Okay.
Vocational rehabilitation, and everybody has to be wanting to go to work. And so all individuals with a mental, physical, or visual disability, despite age, that are interested in going to work, they're still going to come through us as an initial contact and get assigned to a counselor.
Okay.
So yes, very good question. Thank you, Carrie.
Okay. Well, this was excellent questions submitted from the participants here, and I think it just kind of helps explaining that, because of, again, so many different name changes, like you mentioned. It's been known as DARS. Do you know it as VR? Do you know? And then just all the different services and different programs
Right.
that are within it.
And I want to also, let me do this real quick, because let me try to put this in the chat. I want you also to, because we don't know where this will go, but if you want to know about an office that's near you, then this is what you can do. It's www, and I'll put it in the chat, twc.texas.gov/VR near me. So I'm going to put that in the chat. So if for some reason you are wanting to get in touch with somebody, you don't want to talk to me necessarily, that's okay. You can contact this area or this website, and it will tell you who the office is in your area close to you. And then you can call directly to them. So it's www.twc.texas.gov/VR near me. And I just put that in the chat.
Okay. So that's all throughout the state of Texas, no matter where you
where you are, you can find out where the VR office near you is.
Okay.
Okay.
And now, so what is the distinction? If vocational rehabilitation is, again, you qualify because of a disability that impairs your ability to find or maintain work. How does that work in relationship with the workforce solutions? Do you all partner with them? Are you a substitute for what they do?
So they help people, period, get employment. Mm-hmm. So somebody could go over there if they chose to. But we know that people with a disability need a little bit more help. That's why you come to the vocational rehabilitation side. You don't have to. You can be somebody with a disability and you can go straight through workforce solutions if you choose. We're both trying to help people get employed.
Okay. So, but if you do start with vocational rehabilitation, then that the function that you would find at Workforce Solutions will be fulfilled by your VR counselor regardless.
Exactly.
Like you're getting both. So there's no need to do both VR and Workforce Solutions.
No.
Because you
don't have to. Yeah. And sometimes people will start with Workforce Solutions and they'll realize, this person has an intellectual disability. They're not really understanding what they're reading, or they can't navigate through the work in Texas. There's an issue. They may refer them to a VR counselor. And then the VR counselor talks with them. They determine, yes, they do have a disability. And they just can't walk into a Workforce Solutions office like us and get on the computer and start looking for a job and enter their information or take those tests and take those certifications. They can't because of disability. And they may refer them to us.
What does the beginning process usually look like for the person that is ready for gainful employment right now? So maybe not the 14, 15-year-old that's more pre-employment services, but that person who's post high school or ready for community college. What would be one of the first things that they can expect their VR counselor to do with them?
I can't say that because it depends on the disability. Remember when I talked about that VR flow? There's an application and diagnostic phase. And so they have to walk through that process, determine what your issues are, get your medical documentation, determine you're eligible. Those are the first things that happen.
Okay, so the person walking in needs to know that they should be prepared with some type of medical documentation that they do have a disability, and maybe to how to
we're going to request that. Yeah, we're going to request that from the medical provider. We pay for those records.
Okay. And then,
But now that's a very good question. So walking in the door saying, I think I have something doesn't really work. You have to have a documented disability. It's very difficult for us to take VR funds to go search for a disability, for lack of a better word. There has to be something that you have already sought out, counseling, medical documentation, ER visits, something that already shows your disability, and we take it from there.
okay. And so will vocational rehabilitation also cover some of the maybe work-related assessments to tell what your skill set is, or where you're lacking, or where you need additional training?
Exactly. Someone asked the question, can you talk a little bit about your summer internships? No, I can't. Let me tell you why. Because I'm going to give you wrong information, because that's not my wheelhouse. What you want to do is, if you have a student who's interested in VR services, then you need to contact me and let me get you in the system, or call for an office near you and get your student connected to a counselor. And that counselor can walk you through that process and give you all that information.
So is the summer internships only for the pre-employment transition students?
Summer internships are for any of our transition students.
Transition. Okay, so you need to be the
Pre-ETS is a service. Yeah, pre-ETS is one service. Okay.
But for internships, summer internships?
That's another service.
Okay. But the age group, is it age limited? Can you be 30 years old and be part of a summer internship?
No, not under transition, no.
Okay, so summer internships are a part of the transition services,
yes,
which is age limited to 14 to 22 only.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, on adult caseload, you may have internships like all of us. Some of us had internships in order to get employed, but that's connected to your employment goal. So there may be, but I think this person is talking about summer internships for the students.
For the students, okay. Okay. All right, great questions, everybody.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I saw someone else ask about the recording. Will they have access to this recording?
Yes, absolutely. It will be on the ARC's Facebook page. We post the link to this video, and eventually it'll get on our YouTube page too. That takes a little more getting through a couple more hurdles to get it on the YouTube, but it will be on the ARC of Fort Bend County Facebook page.
And so let me just take
later this afternoon.
Okay, so let me just take these final moments to really hone in on. If you know somebody with a mental, physical, or visual disability, call us. We are the best kept secret. We help people with disabilities get employment. And I know we've been lost to some when we moved under TWC Workforce Solutions. Call us. Use that VR near me to find out the office closest to you. Contact me directly. If you know somebody who's interested in going to work, please call us. We can help.
Wow, wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, Marilyn. Any other last minute questions, please? You feel free to unmute yourself, ask a question if you have, or type it in the chat. I know we just really appreciate your information, Marilyn. It's good to know you all are there. And
yes,
we can go to you, we can go to that website, we can call, we can reach out to our counselors at school about this, and start it early. 14, 15, we're kind of thinking about what it is the student might want to do for a career goal later on. And then as the person gets older, high school, past high school, 50, 60 years old, still looking for a job, and VR.
Right.
Okay. Very good. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions, so we'll sign off for now. But thank you again, Marilyn. We appreciate your information today.
Thank you all for inviting me. Everybody, please be safe out there.